Okay. Good evening, welcome to the Thursday, February 18th, 2016 edition of the Auburn Zoning Board of Appeals. Before I get started, a little housekeeping. Is anybody here tonight recording the meeting? Hearing none, seeing none. Do I have a motion to open the hearing? Open the meeting, excuse me.
Motion open.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So our first applicant this evening, 7 o'clock, applicant Gloria LaBeouf, trustee, requesting a special permit under section 3221 and 93 of the Auburn zoning bylaws to allow two-family occupancy use on property located at 514 Rochdale Street, Auburn, Mass, map 52, parcel 7. And we received a request for continuance on this particular matter. And Caleb, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so this hearing started back in March of 2015. So there was a question from the applicant's attorney as to what members were eligible to vote tonight. So I went back and we had 3 members who have missed one of the hearings. So we had 3 members that will be enacting the Mullen Rule. One of those members will be absent again tonight. So if the hearing was open tonight, he would not be able to vote on the matter. We do have 4 regular members and an alternate present tonight. The issue that I spoke with town council about today is the alternate wasn't confirmed until July, and this hearing was open back in March. So there's question as to whether that would, if she could legally vote on it.
Okay.
So I advise that she not vote on this hearing, and that I spoke to the applicant as well as the abutters attorney, and they both were in agreement that it would be cleaner just to continue.
Okay.
And hopefully all regular members will be present at the next meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. So do I have a motion to continue?
Motion to continue.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So for the record, this hearing will remain open for public comment at the town hall. It does not necessarily mean the meeting is closed, and we pick up the matter at the next meeting. It will be a continuation of the open hearing. So do I have a motion that we have to wait until 7:15? So do I have a motion to go into recess until 7:15?
Motion to go into recess until 7:15.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, in the recess for 7:15. Thank you. Return from recess.
I'll make a motion to return from recess.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so our 7:15 applicant, Richard McCarthy, requested a special permit under section 3.2.2.2 of the Auburn zoning bylaws to allow the construction of a 4-unit dwelling on property located at 404 Oxford Street, Auburn, Mass, map 40, parcel 82, and this is a continuation from 8/2015. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you just step to the podium, introduce yourself, please, sir, for the record?
I'm Mike Scott from Waterman Design.
Okay,
Good evening, I'm Richard McCarthy, the applicant.
okay, thank you. I see that there's a few changes to the plans here, obviously, that I'm very happy with, but could you just bring the board up to speed and also for the folks at home, what you're trying to accomplish?
Certainly. I think Mr. McCarthy filed in August of last year a 4-unit multifamily development at 404 Oxford Street. The original plan had 4 units sort of parallel to the right side lot line, and there was surface parking to the left of that or to the south side of the property. The subsequent to his filing, he retained us, Waterman Design. We went out and did a full boundary and topographic survey and delineated and located the wetlands. And we determined there was a little more space out there, so we also talked with Mr. McCarthy, who was willing to and interested in putting some of the parking inside each unit. So this is, I think, an improvement. What you see here is,
I do see that.
you know, less parking out on the open area. You have 6. And Richard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but these are slab on grade, single story, would be condominium units ultimately, each with their own garage and each with a parking space in front of the building, and then a shared 24-foot wide driveway as it's shown today. You know, the property is on water and sewer here, so the requirement for the 10,000 per unit, that's a 2-acre lot. There's plenty of land out here. So that's where we're at. Originally, again, the plan was 4. When I was here last month and there wasn't a quorum, I mentioned that we would be going to the design review committee or the design coordination group, I guess in town, DCG.
Yes.
We did that the week after the last meeting. There were a few questions which I put in sort of email format summarized to Mr. Moody, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are any with respect to what went on at the DCG. But in short, they wanted to know that whether the development was to be a condo or an apartment, and Mr. McCarthy intends to market these as condominiums, so 6 separate ownerships presumably, and with a condominium association. That was of interest to both fire and water and sewer, primarily about the upkeep and how they would bill. But from the fire side, I think it was as much to make sure that there would be ongoing, continual maintenance, that the place would be kept up and wouldn't necessarily be an absentee landlord type situation. There were a few other questions. They were also interested, police was interested in site distance. So myself and another staffer from WDA visited the site a couple weeks ago, and we did some measurements with a wheel and measured the heights appropriately. We believe there's adequate site distance out there, so it's essentially what you have on the existing side street. It's close to, it should be adequate for the AASHTO standard, so we feel that that's not a real concern. And I guess the other question came from DPW regarding stormwater, and as we talked about there, and what I'll say here is this project, if it were approved by your board, still needs to go through site plan review with the planning board, and then ultimately it's got to go to Conservation Commission as well. So there's 2 more, sets of folks who are going to hold the project to a certain standard, and we fully intend to design the project to comply with both the Auburn requirements, but obviously the state requirements as well.
Okay.
May I speak for a moment?
Yes, please.
When I'm born and raised in Auburn, builder by trade. I've done a lot of work in town over the years. Originally, I started navigating this course for myself and found out that I'm over my head. And originally, what I wanted to do was 4 units, and I wanted to do it along with the street. Within my first meeting with conservation and stuff, there was apprehension, and I asked for a postponement, and then I went and I turned the building sideways, and it was more palatable to the town. At that point, I just wanted to explain. I did not realize it was going to be as involved and as costly as it is, and I was originally doing 4. Being that I found out I could do that I met the requirements, the land requirements, etc., to do 6. That I'm trying to defer some of the costs because with what I'm getting into now, it's snowballing, if you will.
Sure.
So that's the reasoning why I went from 4 to 6, and I wasn't sure that 6 would fit and meet all of the requirements until I brought this company in. Right now, I've got a substantial amount out. I'm looking to lay out a substantial amount, and the units are only going to bring in so much more. And like I said, the units were, my middle daughter's special needs, her and mine is where I want to place in, and the others I want to cater to elderly and special needs.
Okay.
That's basically what I want to say.
Okay. I'd like to open it up to members of the board. Let's start from right to left. Mr. Maron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate, Mr. McCarthy, your final comments on some of the historical perspective. Just a quick question on, so your intention would be to occupy one of these
No,
units?
my daughter's 22 years old, with special needs, and I'm looking to set her, I'm not going to live forever. I mean, we're not ready to divorce, but I'm looking to place my daughter for a place forever.
So, okay, so one of these would be for your daughter, and then the other ones would be commercially available?
Correct. Special needs, being slab on grades, the person can park the car right there, no ramps, low countertops, handicapped bathrooms.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any additional questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chacolo?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Ms. Roach? Excuse me.
No, I don't have any questions either.
Ms. Blaze?
Will they all be the same size? Will the back two
Yes, ma'am.
all the same? These are just, that's it,
About
thank you.
900 square feet less than the garage.
Okay. 1 floor, single floor, correct?
Pardon?
Single floor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, so just a couple questions quickly. Would these be 2 or 3 bedroom units each?
2.
Each 2-bedroom unit? Okay. And I'm assuming then means you'll be forming a I can't say it. Yes, you get it, the association that will pay in with fees, maintenance, trash, snow removal.
Everything.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was clear for the members of the board. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and before any motions are set, before we may hear from any abutters, the application speaks to allow the construction of a 4-unit dwelling. So might I suggest that, based on this now being a 6-unit, that in any motion that may be made, that we amend to bring it to the current planning of 6 units.
I agree. And actually, I wanted to have clarification from Caleb. As I read everything through, this does not really change the, doesn't necessitate a change in the permit process, correct? Because it went from 4 to 6 units?
No, the only thing I was looking at was the area of the lot. Is it 80,000?
It's a 2-acre lot, yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was the only question I had.
Right. So in other words, just going from 4 units to 6 does not change the application process?
As far as the special permit, no.
Right, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure on that. So I agree with you, Mr. Maron, that we could probably amend that without further delay. Anything else? Okay. Any abutters present? Since there's only one other in the room, I take not.
I've met with the abutters at the first meeting. I have a good rapport.
Yes, I do recall that. Okay, thank you for adding that. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion on the application for special permit from Mr. McCarthy?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the special permit under section 3.2.2.2, excuse me, of the Auburn zoning bylaws, with the caveat mentioned previously that we amend to allow the construction of a 6-unit, so moving from 4 to 6-unit dwelling on the property located at 404 Oxford Street.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. McCarthy, good luck. Hope everything goes well for you. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, sir. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Good luck, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's all.
I'm just on a roll tonight. Okay, so we're about 5 minutes up, not bad, by the time we shuffle our papers. Thank you.
Good night, gentlemen. Thank you.
Can't believe you're not looking at the two of you with short sleeves.
Got my coat on.
Yeah.
One minute. Okay, 7:30. So our next applicant for the 7:30 hearing is Cellco Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless, requesting a special permit under section 9.3.11 of the Auburn zoning bylaws for personal wireless service facilities, which are referred to as utility pole attachments at the site locations on utility poles 90-1 and 108 on South Street, Auburn, Mass. The assessors map 32 and 33. So a motion to open the hearing.
Motion open?
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the applicant is present.
Yes.
Sir, if you could just introduce yourself for the record and give us an overview of what you'd like to accomplish.
Absolutely. My name is Chris Swiniarski. I'm an attorney representing Verizon Wireless. As stated, we are seeking a special permit, and what we're trying to do is enhance our existing wireless communications network. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that Verizon Wireless does already have a nationwide network that covers just about everywhere in the Commonwealth. What we find, though, as you can imagine, the demand for wireless service is increasing exponentially today and has been for the last few years. Networks right now that may provide coverage in a particular area do not provide that coverage to all of the users seeking to use the network in that area. It's a phenomenon similar to bandwidth issues you may have in your house, where let's say you have a wireless router, it works fine for 2 people, have 8 friends over, doesn't work fine anymore. The same thing is happening with wireless networks all over America, and that's largely due to the proliferation of wireless devices that do a lot more than just make phone calls right now. Phone calls are actually relatively, I wouldn't say insignificant in our business, but just not an area of significant growth. The demand for wireless data, on the other hand, is an area of extremely significant growth. This proposal is part of a new technology that has been emerging in the Commonwealth for about 3 or 4 months now. I've seen it, and we're doing this all over Massachusetts. What it does is it allows us to not have to put in traditional macro sites. Those would be towers or large rooftop installations, but instead to pinpoint specific areas where the demand is very high and install these very innocuous small antennas on utility poles. As you can see from the plans, these antennas are designed specifically to look like transformers, such that they really blend in to the point where, unless somebody told you it was there, you probably would not notice it. These two particular facilities are located right on Route 12 in an area where we've seen significant demand. You can imagine probably because of vehicular traffic. We do have an existing site that we call Auburn 4, and that is shown in the radio frequency report that we submitted as part of a supplementary submission on, looks like February 1st, I believe. So that traditional site, macro site, I have it located at 57 Mill Terrace, serves that area. But it doesn't serve it well. You know, there is some coverage there, but we see a lot of dropped coverage, especially in the data demand. Placing these two small antennas on the existing utility poles allows us to meet that demand of the customers and essentially provide better service for the people on that area. Okay. That's really the gist of what we're doing. I know there was some discussion as to what type of special permit this should be, whether it should be a utility or a wireless facility. It falls into the definition of both, and I think it could be treated either way. I think the end result is the same either way, so I don't have a particular preference.
Okay.
That's what I have, and if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Yes, absolutely. Do the same. Mr. Maurer, you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for being here tonight, giving us the background. I haven't gone through all the specifications, so I think it's well laid out. The size of this unit,
28 inches tall. Diameter is, I believe, 15 inches. Weighs 28 pounds for the antenna. There is also a radio head that looks just like a traditional junction box you would see. The exact size of that, off the top of my head, I've forgotten, which is unbelievable to me because I'm doing this so much now. But the specs are on sheet C3, 37 inches tall, 11 inches wide, 6 inches deep. So that's essentially a panel. Again, these were specifically designed to look exactly like existing equipment that electrical transmission companies are using on utility poles today.
in some of your opening comments, would you suggest that this is a trend that'll increase in use that's relatively new?
Without a doubt.
That's fair?
Without a doubt.
And how many of these would cover an area? I mean, you're strategically placing them in what you anticipate to be higher need areas. What's their bandwidth now, and how many more might you foresee needing? And I know that that's, could be potentially subjective, but...
Exactly. It's a moving target. As I was saying, they're placed in areas where the existing network is not providing what we feel is significant coverage to meet the demand. So it provides a way to relieve that demand. If you look at the map we provided in that radio frequency report, the supplemental submission, you can see the areas that are covered by the existing macro facilities. They're shown in different colors. These do not cover an area nearly that large. It's actually very small, and it's going to vary depending on the height and the terrain and, of course, the buildings. These are not going to shoot through any sort of building, so you're typically going to see these on roads that are high traffic areas, or even, I don't know that in Auburn you have very high traffic pedestrian areas necessarily, but if there were, you would see them there as well. The radius, you can generally, and I'm saying this is very much a rough estimate, but think about it as maybe 1/8 of a mile. And again, but it's totally different. When we go into downtown Boston, think of it as more of like a block because there's so many users packed into that area. So really varies on the density of the customer base using it in that
I
spot.
appreciate your explanation. I think that's absolutely fair. And I think you've done a great job of even going beyond, because I recognize I was kind of opening to a hypothetical of where we would be.
Thanks.
Would you suggest that this type of technology is a bit of a patch to the core business of providing area coverage?
Well, it's not a patch for area coverage because the areas are very well covered right now all over this country where we have significant population. You could think of it as a patch for the capacity coverage. It is an enhancement and an augmentation to the existing coverage where the signal's there, we've got it, but the network is not robust enough to handle how many people want to use it. So in that sense, you could consider it a patch. I guess we never term it that way because patch maybe has a negative connotation.
I'm not trying to affix a negative connotation to it, just to be clear. And I was looking at it as a capacity piece. In layman's terms, it's not my industry, so I certainly don't mean to bait you into that negative territory. That's not where I was going.
No offense taken.
But having said that, and that's really just leading to one of my final questions is it, if it were so, and if you were, and again, slightly hypothetical, but if you were to go back to the core business and increase the capacity in a different way, what would happen to this equipment if it became obsolete based on it being on the pole?
If it was obsolete, it would be taken down. I mean, we would have no reason to keep it up if it became obsolete. Right now, however, there is no way to do that. So there is no way to take the existing towers and really add more capacity to those towers. So traditionally what we've done in the past, really up until 3 months ago, is add new sites, the traditional macro sites. Now we haven't added many of the large towers that were done in the mid-90s when we were first starting, because again, that doesn't achieve the goal of addressing capacity issues. You can think about it as, in the past, height was very important. You wanted to build a very tall tower and get your antennas as high as they could be so that you could cover as far as you possibly could. You don't really want to do that anymore because you're reaching farther than you can handle. So let's say theoretically you've got antennas placed in a spot where they can cover 2 miles of radius. They can't handle the people in that 2-mile radius. So being that that's where we've gone now, and we haven't figured out a way, and as my RF engineers tell me, there is no way to augment those existing sites, it's theoretically impossible that we're ever going to figure out a way to take the existing sites and make them handle more people. Instead, it's going to be like what we're doing now, where we place these small cells or micro facilities in areas to provide coverage in those dense population pockets.
And I thank you for walking down the road of what if with me. And I appreciate your
Again, what ifs in this industry are what I say today may change in a year. It's
may
really,
change in a day, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's rapidly advancing. It really is. I mean, if you think about it, how long ago was it that we had cell phones in our pockets, and it wasn't that long ago that a cell phone was a luxury. It's not a luxury anymore. I don't think anyone on the board doesn't have one. Probably no one on the board has just a phone. Now everything is a smartphone. So that whole transformation took place inside 10 years. So it's moving very fast. It's hard to predict what the future holds, but we are trying very hard to do it to keep the service good.
one final question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Absolutely.
And I want to give my other board members an opportunity to jump in. The anticipated maintenance on these units, and again, maybe in our packet, but it didn't divest that far. Anticipated maintenance, if any, on these units, or are they standalone, operating, in a non-maintenance capacity?
There's no regularly scheduled maintenance for these units. They literally are installed and they function until there's either malfunction or an obsolescence issue where a different type of antenna is used. Now, obviously, we have a way of monitoring how things are working. We know immediately if an antenna stops working, and then we perform the maintenance of replacing the antenna. So no regular maintenance, there's nobody visiting these or going up on the poles. Very much like the current electrical grid. I mean, there isn't actually that much ongoing maintenance. It's more reactionary to when there's a failure. It's simply not the kind of thing that needs maintenance. Again, like most electronics, you don't don't do regularly scheduled overhauls or anything like that. When it fails, it is repaired or replaced. Otherwise, it keeps functioning.
Thank you very much for your responses and your
pleasure.
attention, sir. I'd like to reserve any additional questions after we circulate
Absolutely.
through the other board members, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Chacolo.
Question for you that would go to cost to the consumers that you're going to be servicing. Okay, is this in preparation for additional bandwidth being offered? And I'm going to take exception to the bandwidth that you're saying, because you said it can't go, you wouldn't be taking advantage of this unit if you were inside this building, correct?
These particular ones, you would not.
No, so that the bandwidth that you were offering is going to be no plus to the consumers that are sitting in their homes.
In their home, well, in the immediate vicinity, but this is not a residential area. No, this is not designed for the home, and there's a good reason for that. There's not significant demand inside the home. Very much the opposite. Inside the home, most people are using their Wi-Fi. They're not using their mobile phone connection or their mobile device connection to access data. They're using their Wi-Fi, and there's a good reason for that. You're paying a flat fee.
So the data, is it going to be more geared to commercial interests?
No, it's exactly the opposite. There aren't that many commercial uses that use mobile devices. You don't see offices that have a mobile network. Generally, every business has a hardline or a landline internet access network.
So who's going to take advantage of these?
Every single Verizon customer driving down Route 12.
So you said more for data.
Yes.
It's more for voice, I take it.
No, for data.
So nobody driving is going to take advantage of data,
Why not?
or should, right?
No, everyone thinks that, but that's not true. Your mobile device is constantly using data. If you were to ask people right now, very few people listen to the radio. Many times in your car, and almost every new car that you buy, including lower priced cars, actually have systems where you use your mobile connection to be
So it's
streaming.
repeatable data, not going out, people seeking the data.
Right, but your phone is still using that data. If you're in an area where, let's say, you're streaming music, as most modern cars provide for, you're using data. If you're using GPS on your phone, you're using data. Your phone is constantly downloading data and uploading information as well. So this doesn't mean that people are actively using their phone with their fingers while they're driving. The device is certainly actively using data to do the things the consumers want to do, without a doubt.
Will there be any additional costs incurred to any and all consumers because of this?
No. I mean, this is a standard upgrade to the network. I suppose in the long run, when you think about operating a business, as capital expenditures are made and inflation occurs, costs probably go up. But if you are at all maybe cognizant of commercials that you're seeing on TV right now, there's a bit of a competitive pricing war going on between all mobile carriers. We don't see prices going up for consumers right now at all. It's quite the opposite. But as a direct result of these, no. If anything, this very much is more efficient than the traditional facilities that we would have been deploying. The cost to construct one of these is so much smaller than the cost to construct a tower. We're talking less than 10%, far less than 10% in most cases. Obviously, the permitting costs are a big thing. This is much more cost effective than that. When Verizon hires me to represent them at the municipal level to permit a new tower, it's rarely done in one meeting. It takes a long time. It costs quite a bit of money. We have a lot of expert testimony given. This is quite the opposite. So it's really much more inexpensive, and therefore it should, if anything, reduce costs to the consumer.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not at this time.
Ms. Roach?
This may be spelled out in the plans, but can you just give me an estimate of how far up the pole it's it will be placed, and I'm just thinking of like sight lines driving, is it gonna impede drivers' visibility, I guess?
Absolutely not.
I know it's a small unit, but,
Better than an estimate, I'll give you the
oh,
exact
okay.
height.
Thank you.
The first one will be, the center of the antenna will be at 35.4 feet.
Okay, so clearly not,
Math, 35 feet 2 inches, I think.
okay, okay.
No, not at all within the line of sight. And there's a good reason for that. It would have no effect if it was at that level, because there's so much other stuff at that level. So again, this is radio frequency, so it's obstructed by physical objects. You have to put it up high. If you had it at, let's say, head height, a van drives by, it's not going through that van.
Right.
So it's up high. This one's at 35 feet and change. The second one, excuse me,
Is that all the way here? Did I miss that?
is at 24 feet. So again, I
So
mean,
still, yeah.
yeah, nowhere near where it would obstruct any visibility, again, or really be visible. You know, when these things first started coming out, which was like about 3 months ago, I looked at the telephone pole at the top of my driveway. It looks just like the transformers on that. Those transformers that I never noticed were even there until I looked for them that day. It's not an obstruction. I mean, you probably don't notice transformers when you drive by telephone poles right now. They're there. And after I said this tonight, take a look and you'll see that they are there. But you wouldn't notice them if you're not looking for them. They've just become very commonplace.
And how about, I know it's a commercial area, so it's pretty well lit anyway, but any additional lighting
No.
or anything as far as obstruction? Oh,
No, absolutely not.
I'm good.
Okay. Ms. Blaze?
So this is directly across the street from Verizon store, correct?
You know, I haven't been there. I don't know. But if you say so, I'm
It is,
willing to
yeah.
bet that you're correct.
Yeah.
No coincidences there?
I don't know that that matters that much, believe it or not. I don't think the demand at a Verizon store is that much higher than it is in other areas with dense traffic. So, you know, I think you would see that the demand is high probably because the Verizon store is placed in a place where there's a lot of traffic. But, you know, when you think about how many users are in a store, it may be 10 on a very busy day. So this is not designed to address that. It wouldn't really be an effective use. And we do have other in-building technology to cover our stores. So it should be, and I don't work much with the retail side of things, but I do know that inside every store, there should be top-notch service, and that's via other ways that we augment the service inside the store, and that we do in a lot of buildings too. You know, if you go to any major hotel, major sports venues, we have installations inside. You know, I'm working on just about every major hotel in Boston right now and upgrading systems where there are antennas that are this big in the hallways. You don't see them because they're camouflaged and they look like smoke detectors or security cameras. You have no idea. So this doesn't serve the store. This is to serve the road. We have other ways to do that. And again, you know, those antennas don't transmit outside. They focus inside. Those things are available for people's homes too. Lots of people do purchase those and use them in their homes if they're in an area where, let's say, the signal is fairly weak, but maybe the signal works outside. You can actually get an antenna that can be taken from outside and amplified into your home, and that's more likely what we're using in the retail locations.
How long would it take to do the installation of it?
It's 2 days, three days if someone takes a really long break. It's very quick. I mean, you can see the nature of this. It's essentially 3 components and some cable, so it's very fast. And those are conservative estimates. I mean, we've deployed these in less than 1 day. You can make this a half-day job.
Okay, it is right in front of the fire department, so.
And we certainly coordinate with everybody before we do that.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Anything else?
I wanted to reserve any questions you might have. I do have two quick follow-ups, but I wanted to reserve any.
My only question is, the first one, are you aware of any pending legislation right now to address these on a state level?
On a state level, no. I wish there was, and my firm actually may be starting an initiative on that, but no, there isn't, and it is a little frustrating right now, both for me and for you, and when I say you, I mean all municipalities, because I have these meetings really all over New England right now, and nobody's bylaw or ordinance really addresses this sort of thing for obvious reason. It didn't exist when you wrote the bylaws, and the technology maybe has been in development for a few years, but it hasn't been widely known for more than a few months right now. It would be nice if there was some sort of state legislation to do this. I don't see that happening. That's mainly because of Chapter 48. Our Zoning Enabling Act really reserves that power to the municipalities. Obviously, you're probably aware that federal law does preempt a lot of local law and state law with respect to some aspects of traditional facilities. And to the extent that these things are like traditional facilities, those laws would still apply, but nothing that really focuses and targets these things. With one exception, which doesn't have to do with permitting, has to do with the property right or the leasing. State law does require utility companies to make this space available to telecommunications carriers, so they cannot say no if we ask them to use the poles, and there's good reason for that. That's simply a function of antitrust laws and anti-competition laws. I mean, you have one entity that owns the utility poles. If you don't let me use it, I've got to try to build more utility poles. Nobody wants more utility poles, and obviously that's a major expenditure. And those are not new laws. Those laws applied to the electrical transmission and phone companies, and those laws started in the 1890s in the Commonwealth. But other than that, there is no pending legislation. I think you may see something come up at the federal level in the next couple of years, but there's nothing right now. Believe me, I'm watching it like a hawk.
I'm sure you are. And my other question is, have you installed any of these in any of the municipalities of the Commonwealth yet? And you mentioned it's only a few months old.
Yep.
Okay.
The first ones that were installed, I get that question a lot, and the answer changes almost every week. The first ones were done in Amesbury.
Okay.
I'm trying to think where we've recently done some. I know Brockton and Methuen, we obtained the permits very quickly, so I have to assume those have gone up already as well. So those are three that I know are, well, Amesbury I know for sure is up. I had pictures of Amesbury. Brockton and Methuen, I'm 99% sure that we have some up there. And we are at this stage in, geez, I want to say it's probably 40 different municipalities right now.
Okay.
And in some of the more urban areas, many more. For example, 35 of these in Lowell that we're at the same stage right now. North Andover, I'm 18 of these where we've already had this discussion, hammered out what exactly they want to see, which is largely coming down to be the same everywhere. We do the special permit application like we're doing tonight. We realize that a lot of the requirements aren't really applicable because of the very small nature of this, but it's the law we have, and we've all come to the conclusion that at the very least we have to do the public notice. And that's something I'm agreeable to as well. That slows us down a lot, but at the end I have to be able to tell my client that this permit that I get is solid, and if someone challenges it, I think it's solid. And if we somehow subverted the public notice without any authorization to do that in the bylaw, it's not going to be valid. Someone can say, hey, that thing wasn't in front of my house. Now it is. I never heard about it. You could argue, well, it looks just like the transformer, but I don't want to have that argument. I'd rather just make it solid from day one. What I will tell you, though, a lot of towns are also asking us for guidance on how to draft a bylaw that addresses these things. We're working on that as well. Newton has something that is pretty close. It was thinking of something a little different, but it's almost 90% applicable, I'd say. So if that is an interest in Auburn, that's one to take a look at.
Okay.
But That's the story.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Mr. Maron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and luckily of the questions I had, one of them you've already addressed, which is great, so I can save us some time. But I'd like to circle back to, and I'm going to apologize up front if you covered this in your opening comments, and I just didn't pick it up close enough. But deciding on the location, you've got a proposal for 2 installations here. So that's 2 only currently. How do you decide on that on locations for those?
Simply by data that we compile. I did mention, but maybe I didn't dive into it in great detail. We literally can monitor the network down to knowing how many devices at any given time of the day have asked for data and not gotten it as fast as they should have. So we have that data down to levels that really are so nice that they almost don't seem reasonable to collect, but we know exactly how many things are failing, and that's where we are able to pinpoint exactly where the high demand is.
Appreciate the specific response. So you can pinpoint where that need specifically is, and then this is a device, a mechanism to address that need.
Absolutely.
So given that, and part of what the chairman had asked on 3-month-old and, I'd call that new in anybody's book, right?
Yeah, it is.
So the overall strategy, and I'll tell you openly what's driving my question here is the overall mapping or strategy, recognizing that it's new, from a town perspective. Are we looking at potentially you seeing the operation of these on every pole we own?
Question every town asked me.
Right, what volume, and if I can cascade that even further, defer this to inspections, Caleb, would we want to then go down the road and potentially a bylaw review that looks at, what's permissible to us? Do we want to limit numbers of or volume here? And I know that's a 2-part question, but if you wouldn't mind addressing the primary.
Yeah, I could probably answer both with sort of the same information. It's very hard to envision that this would be on every single utility pole. For starters, the demand in residential areas is not going to grow for wireless devices because of the fact, as I mentioned before, that people use their wireless internet. Very soon, these devices exist already. You will be able to use your phone on your wireless internet and not use the network to make phone calls. Now, phone calls are not a big thing, but they're significant at home. I happen to live in a town that doesn't have any towers. I don't have any phone service at my house. It's very marginal. I don't have a phone that can make the calls on the internet yet, but obviously I can do that on my computer. That's the future there. So you're not going to see these things going into residential neighborhoods. There's just no need for it. And that demand's not going to grow unless the neighborhoods somehow get much more denser. That I don't think is a very realistic concern for the immediate future or even the near distant future. I don't think we see any suburbs of Massachusetts turning into Boston anytime soon, or maybe the immediate suburbs of Boston, places that are, like Malden or Newton, where they're very dense suburban areas that are barely suburban at this point. I don't see that happening. So without that density, there will never be the need. There will never be the demand for the service. Now, in commercial areas, if you do have that explosive growth in density, that's precisely when the need for more of these comes up. I can tell you that in Boston, we have these on Boylston Street in the Back Bay, Copley Square area. We have these on light poles that are staggered about every block. So, and it's a little bit different than this, though. It's a light pole that actually has the antenna built into it and you don't see. If you get to the point where your density is like that, I think it's fair to say you can expect that our need would be such that you would want this every block, every 500 feet or so. But realistically, do we think that density is happening ever in the suburbs? Maybe in 50 years, maybe 100 years, but do we have any idea what the technology will be in 50 years? No, absolutely.
I think that's fair. And just one minor quick follow-up. So with that kind of volume in Boston, that's happened within the last 3 months, that installation?
Yeah, those are a little bit different in design. That happened in probably the last 6 months. That is sort of a hybrid of the inside style of antennas I was telling you about. We call that a DAS, or a distributed antenna system, and that's been around for a very long time. So what we're doing there is sort of a hybrid of that and what we're proposing here.
Okay, and that really captures the essence of, the 3 month is really for this very specific unit.
Exactly.
And that the technology isn't necessarily that new, the adaption of this isn't that new. It's really the application of this unit.
Well, a little more complicated than that.
Okay, no, that's fair. And I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I think, I mean, I'm certainly satisfied, in vetting that. I don't want to keep the other board members with vetting my additional question, because I don't have any additional questions, but I didn't know if, Caleb, as I invoked you earlier, if you had any thoughts on volume in town, even in the commercial areas, on what the board might suggest as far as limiting numbers or any expansive growth in this device.
I think the way our bylaw is written now, the 9311 that they're applying for, the issue I have with that is that the planning board is the special permit granting authority under
I did see that
9311.
earlier, and that was a follow-on to anybody's motion, but
There's nothing in our bylaw that goes to this application, so they're going to the nearest thing, which would be the wireless tower. I don't know, as the application stands, I don't know that the ZBA can make any determination on it. I think it has to go to the planning board.
I agree.
that was-
From what I read earlier as well.
I will say
I didn't know
that,
it as such, but I thought that would be beneficial to everyone to hold the hearing in the event that they did move towards the planning board. It would not necessarily have to come back here in front of us again in case it was reinterpreted. So that was sort of my goal by allowing the hearing to move forward and having the discussion, so it's on public record.
And for one, I agree with that strategy, because as I read the bylaw specifically, and in fairness to the applicant who's still standing with us, but I look at this as a planning board jurisdiction under that bylaw specifically, and not the zoning board.
But we could also take a vote on it, as even though it's maybe symbolic, and I can write that in the decision, saying that the board recognized the fact that it was a planning board decision, and without interfering with any of their decisions, we decided to move it forward towards them. I think as long as we have a carefully worded decision.
If I could just ask a question, my colleague had prepared this, and I think I'd spoken with you. I thought we were instructed to go before this board and to treat this as a utility, and I thought our initial attempt was going to be a special permit from the appropriate authority, and that's why this was termed as an application under the wireless communications facility section of the bylaw. So I guess I'm a little unclear, and I apologize for that.
And that's okay, no, and that's fine, but
Not sure what we're talking about if we don't have. a
it's
permit.
interesting because the utility pole attachments don't necessarily fall under the bylaw that cover cell towers. So I think there's a question whether or not, and again, because our bylaw is not up to date with current technology is where our questions lie, I believe. And so I can see where there's probably 2 or 3 different interpretations of whether or not this board has the authority to govern over this particular hearing, because it really is a utility pole attachment, which we don't typically address. Again, that's why I thought it would be best that we can still write a decision on our opinion of it, even though you would still be going to the planning board after us regardless. So this would not be a waste of your time or our time, but the planning board will ultimately make the decision on whether or not you'd be able to do this.
And is that via a special permit for a wireless facility?
Well, it's gonna fall into that bylaw ultimately, because that's all we really have to address, I believe. Caleb, what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Caleb, I don't want to interrupt you if you had a comment. Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest, and for the purposes of this discussion, if I may read.
Absolutely, please.
And this is what we're focused on here, is it within the bylaw of 9.3.11, 9.311.1, is it succinctly says no personal wireless service facility shall be placed, constructed, or modified except upon issuance of a special permit by the planning board. And so I think what we're discussing here is for us to have authority over issuing that special permit would be in contrast, it wouldn't be consistent with how this reads specifically for the planning board.
And the reason,
Well, I understand, and I have to tell you right now, like I said, I didn't prepare this, and I wasn't involved in the initial discussions with staff, and I'm happy to answer questions at all, but I don't think I can even accept a permit from this board, and so I'm not sure, we're not really seeking anything from this board then. If the board doesn't have the authority to give a permit, like I said, I'm happy to take opinions and answer questions, but there's nothing we're seeking here.
well, there is and there isn't, because as I look at it, and the one that I sort of hung my hat on is 9.311.2, where they say the special permit granting authority. And that's where we lie. We are the special permit granting authority in town.
I thought we just read that it was the planning board.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It says it is a special permit granted by the planning board, but the special permit granting authority, as I've read it for many years, is the zoning board, correct?
Not for all uses.
Right,
Sorry?
typically most towns.
Not for all uses.
Not for all
The
uses.
planning board is the special permit granting authority for this use, as they're applying under 9311.
Okay.
The one issue that may pertain to the ZBA would be the height of the antenna.
Right,
There's a
because-
25-foot height restriction in the LB district.
Okay.
For which, but
And again, because we're talking about utility poles here, we're not talking about a building structure. That's where, we're not talking about the movie theater, for example.
I agree. It's
This is why I kind of picked my brain on this.
uncharted water for,
Right.
there's nothing in our bylaw.
Mr.
that-
Chairman, and I appreciate where you're going with this, because I also would defer to, we're the granting authority for a special permit case, but as it's written here, and I agree with talking of, this is a bit intuitive to read into, you could look at this different ways, but I would suggest that on, this discussion was certainly valuable, I think for us, for the town specifically, and for the applicant, but I would suggest that we are not the issuing authority for this special permit.
Okay, so,
That seems black and white to me in your bylaw as well. I'm not sure how this application even came to this board.
well,
And
that's why I allowed it to come forward, because I saw it in a couple of different ways, and I wanted to be clear on it. But
I'd be saying
again, this is the
different things if I wasn't
purpose of the
being
discussion.
recorded.
Yeah, my comments are in no way an indictment of your pre-work. I think it was extremely helpful, certainly, on discovery for me.
No issue, believe me.
And
Just,
Mr. Chairman, I think it was certainly prudent for you to open the hearing, and I support that directly.
So what do we do?
Well, realistically, we take no motion on it, and we're allowed to move forward to the planning board. I think it's probably the appropriate step for us at this point. And given the fact that we've already had the hearing, I don't believe it would be necessary to come back to us regardless. I think it's safe to say that you're gonna go to the planning board after all this information.
Yeah, again, like I said, I don't see that we need anything.
Yeah, respectfully, I would suggest that we perhaps make a motion to close the hearing, and Caleb, is there any additional comments that you would have? Do you feel that might be an appropriate course of action based on the way the bylaws are?
I would agree with that. I did not see the application come through, and when I saw it, that was the first thought I had, that the planning board's the approving authority.
All right, well, I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think
Very
we're done.
informative and well-done presentation.
All right, thank you.
And thank you for the
Be
education.
back
and
before the planning board.
Thank you for working through this with us.
All right,
I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
your time. Good evening.
All right, do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
All in favor?
Aye.
Second? No, okay. Well, the only thing we have left really on the agenda this evening is, I don't believe Caleb has any decisions for us to sign yet, but we also have the July, August, and November 2015 minutes that I want to publicly thank Ms. Westerman for actually taking the time out, reviewing all the meetings by video, and doing an excellent job on establishing the minutes for us. So do I have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes for July, August, and November of 2015?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, I think that's it. We have a motion to close the meeting.
Motion to close the meeting?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.